All right, Molo, Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good morning, or rather good evening. Welcome to the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Nice little Freudian slip there, because this is a pre-recording of the show. Oh man, do I not have a special guest for us tonight? Someone who we haven't seen on the show for quite a while. So it'll be a breath of fresh air to really pick at this person's brain, especially as we look at topical news items, things we've been talking about, and solid analysis, of course, from our guest tonight. The guest I keep referring to in a rather cryptic manner is, of course, Sara Gon from the Institute of Race Relations and the Daily Friend. Remember, the Daily Friend, of course, a publication you can catch at their website at dailyfriend.co.za. They're taking a bit of a hiatus at the moment. They're on leave, but I'm sure they'll be back on your screens in, January, fresh and ready to rumble. Speaking about being ready to rumble, I hope your thumbs or your click fingers are ready. Are you ready? Rumble away and press that like button. It is your only price of admission here at the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Do me a silent favor, whether you're watching the simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, or on Twitter. Hit that like button, folks. Keep my engagement above 50%. In other words, if there's 100 people watching, 50 people, please. We need at least 50 likes, 50% engagement. Let's do it. Let's do it. Remember, if you're watching especially rather on YouTube, then do me an even bigger favor. Subscribe to the channel. Yeah, do it. Hit that subscribe button and that bell notification so that you're notified when the show is on your screen. Speaking about your screens, you can find us on our website. Put that on your screen at bigdaddyliberty.com. There, of course, you can also support the show. We're building a mug club, a BDL club, if we can call it that, here on the show, as there's a growing number of you who are contributing between 50 and 100 Rand a month towards the channel as we brace ourselves for a, let's call it the program of action next year as we travel the country pursuing liberty ideas, pushing rather liberty ideas into communities. And it's those funds that I will be using to do the traveling. So please go to bigdaddyliberty.com, find the payment method that suits you, and become part of the BDL club. Now, with that being said, enough of that jibber jabber. Let's get to our host, or rather to our guest, pardon me. What's wrong with me tonight? We'll get to our guest in a second as we unpack quite a few topics tonight, things that I think will whet your appetite. Speaking, of course, about my guest, this year's on screen, Sara Gon. Good evening.
Hi, Sichle. Just to tell you that with regard to Daily Friend, we're not even taking quite a hiatus. We're just sort of lowering things a little because we're doing an opinion and a news item every day until we get back online in the new year, when we'll up the pace a bit. But we want to sort of keep things going. So it's dailyfriend.co.za.
There you go. You've heard it from Sara Gon herself. Make sure you visit the website, as mentioned earlier on. We'll punt it again at the end of tonight's show. Speaking about the show, Sara, goodness me, what a topsy-turvy past, let's call it 10 days it has been, both on the international arena, with perhaps the World Cup dominating headlines for a myriad of reasons, and of course at a local level, which will begin here, with the ANC and their policy, or rather their elective conference, the 55th edition of it, held this past weekend and adjourned, of course, to the beginning of January. An odd little feature there, but nonetheless, let me put him on screen. The biggest winner from this particular event, there he is, beaming on screen at the moment, Cyril Ramaphosa, all thumbs up, all smiles, after having defeated, of course, the sort of, I'll call them the odd trio. On the one hand, a rather glam-looking Willem Kize, who you can see there, who had yoked himself to an even glamour-looking Jacob Zuma. There he is on screen with his daughter, who many call the devil incarnate on social media, but we won't go there for a moment. And of course, one of the biggest losers of the day, Nkosazana Gamini Zuma, or Buffalo Bill, as we call her on this channel. We spoke about this particular issue yesterday, funny enough, with Gabriel Krauser, who unpacked a myriad of issues. But I want to head in a different direction with you. There's two things I want to chew on with you, Sara. Number one, these allegations that are now beginning, not now, but were surfacing even back then, of effectively vote buying or delegate buying, allegations of 20,000 Rand plus being sold or rather offered to delegates. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it was interesting because it sort of came to my attention in a way I didn't expect, in that it was a TV report on the fact that there were rumors of money being paid to people to vote in one way or the other. And then they interviewed a young guy from, I don't remember his name, but I think he represented Orange Farm, which is probably, pretty poor environment where much service delivery is needed. And he said that in just wandering around the delegates in wandering around the delegates, he became aware that amounts of 10,000 Rand were being offered to people to vote in a certain way. Now, this was confirmed by, let me say, I can't reveal it, but let me say a very high-level source who said that the average payoff was between 20 and 40,000 Rand, which means that this conference was business as usual. And I do know that there were attempts by old elders of the ANC to completely rejig and present a new way of voting from the membership directly to the conference, to cut out the patronage and to cut out the corruption. And clearly it has not been accepted for that very reason, that it would cut out the patronage and it would cut out the corruption. And I can only assume, and I may be going out a bit of a limb on this, but I can only assume that the money in the famous couch was intended for this, among other expenditure that had to be laid out at this conference. And I think we know that Cyril spent a huge amount of money in the last conference 5 years ago, so it's not beyond the possibility at all that the old way of getting delegates to change their votes was to pay for them to do so. And tens of thousands of Rand.
Sorry, I wanted to jump in here because I just opened up as you were talking a piece by The Independent, and I'll quickly read because it really corroborates effectively what you're suggesting. It was the chatter, if you will, of cash exchanging hands. They're citing a delegate here who is said to have supported Dr. Zweli Mkhize. Let's see here. The delegate who spoke on condition of anonymity said the group came to the registration center and spoke to several delegates in the queue. But when they came to him with an offer, this particular anonymous delegate, refused. The delegate who said he supported Zweli Mkhize said the group even gave him the lineup, which included the president, Ronald Lamola for deputy president position, Fikile Mbalula, and Phoebe Potgieter for Secretary General and Deputy Secretary General positions. Here's where it gets juicy, Sarah. Quoting here, they said, there is a group here led by ministers. This guy mentioned them by name, and we know they are key members of the CR22 cabal. That's the Cyril Ramaphosa 2022 cabal. They attempted to buy delegates for 20,000 Rand each and attempted, or rather, I think it's a Sikh mistake, they tempted me as well, which I vehemently refused, as I care for a country more than monetary delegates. Lol. I'm sorry. I had to take a moment to laugh at that. This is an ANC delegate. Doesn't care about money. Wink, wink. Furthermore, he said the group was decampaigning Paul Mashatile and pushing Ronald Lamola to be elected as the deputy president. Pardon me. During the media briefing early on Friday, this is the spokesperson of the ANC responding, urged delegates to report vote buying or any other unbecoming behavior to the conference steering committee, yada, yada, yada. Again, as I come to you, Sarah, we just laughed at it for a moment there. It kind of does ring as ironic and hilarious for an ANC member to claim any moral high ground in the sense of, oh no, he says, I'm never tempted by money. I do things for the love of country. ANC. Yeah, anyway. But this is quite a serious allegation in a sense, isn't it?
Well, it sort of fits with what the bits I heard. And maybe one should be a little less cynical because, Ronald Lamola didn't get in. Paul Mashatile did, but one doesn't know maybe whether there was finance on the other side. as I say, it's, the funny thing about this is people, didn't watch much, I wasn't in town, but I think this was the one ANC conference that people actually didn't really care about. It's almost it doesn't matter anymore. For the first time, it really doesn't matter anymore, because we know how CR22 performs, and it was just a question of who would get in and who wouldn't. And for me, the fact that someone like sorry, I forget, woman Mokanyane got in is just symptomatic of the rot.
Mind-boggling. And maybe let's conclude this section by talking about that. The quality or lack thereof of its candidates. Gareth van Onsling, and I did mention this yesterday too, Gabriel. Gareth van Onsling tweeted something very interesting where he pointed out there's almost an inverse relationship, where on the one hand, the more there is a decline of the ANC's prospects, its electoral performance and the like, the more there is an ascendancy, if you will, of the worst characters in the ANC, the most useless characters in the ANC, whether we're talking about a Fikile Mbalula, failed Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, failed Minister of Police, failed Minister of Transport, now being given a central position, a central organizer position, if you will, as Secretary General of the party. This is an ANC that really, if anything, Sara, celebrates mediocrity.
Oh no, absolutely, and clearly there are favors owed to an extraordinary degree. I mean, look, at the only good thing about somebody like Fikile Mbalula being moved to the ANC in that position is that he cannot any longer be the Minister of Transport or the Minister of anything else that he could get his hands on and destroy. So absolutely. No, it does. I mean, the women are new, but I mean, Mokanyane, she's appalling. And
a vile
otherwise,
character.
The rest, she is a vile character, and all of the others, the younger women, not so much. I don't know quite as well, but certainly the men. I mean, very little has been discussed about Paul Mashitile's less than clean past. So it's, well, I don't know. Is it the delegates? Is it the guys in charge? Either way, as I say, I think that unless Cyril pulls a rabbit out of a hat, which I think he can do, but he won't, that it's just going to go downhill.
Well, perhaps let's talk about that as we segue to that second thing that I want us to chew on, the brown nosing, Sara, the nauseating praise and worship of leftist politicians in this country who wear a veil or wear I nearly said a hijab, but nonetheless, but what I'm trying to say is they conceal who they really are, and behind a veil of smoke and mirrors, and of course, dribbling and distracting. What do I mean? Here's a Cyril Ramaphosa who we're being told by the mainstream media, oh, he's fantastic, they say. Oh, he's pro-business. The business community loves Cyril. He understands the business community. Again, Gabriel eviscerated this point yesterday, but I want us to unpack it a bit more, because when we talk about the National Democratic Revolution as a core ideological imperative of the ANC, a leftist, communist, Marxist doctrine, which basically sees and argues for all power being vested into the centralized hands of the ANC, in all aspects, economic, social, and political. That's who the ANC are. They're not some liberal market economy policy, family first, liberty forward type society party, are they?
Well, if you watch or you listen to what Ramaphosa says, when he speaks publicly, it's quite fascinating how when he speaks to a general audience or a specific audience, like a business audience, he conveys an impression of sympathy and support and understanding, but he never actually uses words like free markets, deregulation, etc. It's an astonishing thing that he manages to create the impression of something that he doesn't actually say. But if you want to see what he really says, is you must watch speeches or read speeches given to very specific constituencies. And the first one I wrote about, which I take pride in writing in June 2016, so I was ahead of the curve, was he was addressing a group of traditional leaders. It was right after Obama's visit. And his speech was about being a socialist. And he said he was a socialist. And he said he was proud of being a socialist, etc. That is the man, because that's the ethos of the ANC. It's the revolution, and part of the revolution is continuing with or allowing a capitalist economy to run, and then to move gradually and in a typical sort of communist manner, surreptitiously into a socialist and then a communist economy. And it possibly the capitalist side lasted until such time as things just disintegrated under patronage, corruption, and BE and cadre deployment and all those wonderful things. But this is unless he has a Damascene moment to actually repair the country, this is the path that they chose before and solidified in 1969. Now, that was a hell of a long time ago. I was very, very young. And they are pursuing that to its nth degree. The only thing about their pursuit is I'm not sure that their pursuit will be that successful in the end, with any hope, with any luck, because they've been not very good at doing anything they've done.
That's right.
And they certainly haven't a capable state that's going to run NDR successfully to the end. And of course, the tragedy usually is that even if you have a capable state, which I think very few communist countries have had, it doesn't end up well, because it's inherently contradictory.
Let's speak about those contradictions. One of them is, of course, and you're absolutely correct in characterizing them as holding on to those almost Marxist and Leninist notions to an extent, notions of what the economy should be and how it should be organized politically. So the economic side of it is Marxist, in the sense that, as you pointed out, they believe that society happens in epochs, as Marx argued, where there's capitalism, which transitions into socialism, which transitions into communism. The political side of it is Leninist, insofar as the notion of democratic centralism, which is what the NDR, or National Democratic Revolution, argues for. Democratic centralism is this idea that society is governed by a small elite or a vanguard of the working class, which in this case they see the ANC as, right? And that particular vanguard then makes decisions about all sectors, all areas of society. But let's focus on that economic side of it, because I think it's important. This is where there's contradictions, as you said. Their characterization of capitalism is actually not true market capitalism, free trade, the protection of property rights, a society of law and order. It's actually more a kleptocracy, where, yes, there's the free, in inverted commas, movement of capital, but it's only as free as it moves within their circles of closed cronies, if you will, which is why you see a society of politicians who are mega rich in this country, and their friends, of course, the political elites, who may happen to be in corporate South Africa. I mean, let's not forget corporate South Africa is also complicit. But let's unpack this for a moment, because when they talk about the economy and unleashing the economy, that's actually what they're talking about, creating more of a society of cronies through laws that they write, i.e. BE and the like.
Yeah, I think if you want to get a sense of the economy as seen through NDR, you've got to look at the fact that despite the disasters that were SAA, and despite the real disaster that is Eskom beyond description, they will not let go enough to make things work, and they can't make things work. So we're ending up in that stasis of eternal load shedding, possibly to blackout stage, because they cannot do the job, but they won't give the reins over to people who may be able to do the job. If you look who our Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Ibrahim Patel, is a dyed-in-the-wool communist. Now, that's a very important position, because that dictates so much of what should comprise the flow of goods and services across borders. And we have red tape up to our wazoo. Now, you don't put a dyed-in-the-wool communist in a position as vital as that unless you mean him to be there. And if you mean him to be there, you mean him to move to an ever increasingly statist command economy. And that's really, those are the things to watch. They haven't been moved. He has not been moved. He has been there now for years. There are other communists, but that is really the key area. The Deputy of Treasury, David Masondo. You know, if he really intended to move to reform, as we would understand reforming, those people wouldn't be there. They would have been replaced by people who support a free market or classical liberal regime. And it was quite interesting. You talk about the mainstream media. I heard a chat, I think it was, no, I read about an article in NCA of Mandy Wiener, 702's correspondent at the conference. And she had been talking to Stephen Qatars, used to be colleagues, he's now at SAFM. And they were both talking realistically about the conference. And then at the very end, they said, well, Cyril's got, he's 500 votes ahead of Mkhize, which is larger than he had against NZZ originally. Maybe now he'll be emboldened to make those changes. Well, as I said, unless he has a Damascene conversion, they have not got the message that those are not the changes, that the changes are on the table. Expropriation without compensation, the land court, NHI, God help us, and employment equity. I mean, that is, if you want to see where the ANC is going, look at the legislation sitting on Cyril Ramaphosa's desk.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, Sarah, again, as we taper off this section, I think it's important that we hammer this point home, because as you said, there are some people who simply do not get it. They live in this fugazi, this imaginary land where, there's this hope against hope that Papa Cyril will come and save us, or that somehow the ANC will reform because they can see the electoral loss, and that'll prompt them to act. People simply don't understand that there is an actual ideology here, a forged in red and tooth and claw ideology that actually seeks to give more power to politicians, the state, and less freedom, if you will, to what I often talk about, right, as to who we are as South Africans. I like to talk about us being a faith, flag, family, and freedom type society. People just want to get on, with going to work, coming back home, raising families, and doing so in a safe, prosperous, non-racial, and free society. ANC have no intention of any of that. If anything, they want a society of the elites, a closed crony society that controls the rest of us. Final thoughts?
Well, I think part of the reason they want it is now what's baked into the ANC is that access to patronage, access to the resources, access to the jobs, access to the money is so baked into the whole ANC that the NDR is entirely intended to serve that purpose, because the two are complementary in keeping the ANC with access. I mean, can you imagine if the opposition were in one form or another to take control in 2024, and instantly, though not all of that access, but most of it will disappear. Now, can you imagine? There goes the whole way in which the ANC operates, and it's tied to the NDR, and the NDR is tied to it. So, as I say, Damascene conversion or bust, and it's going to be bust.
Absolutely. Sarah, as we tape off our conversation, we did say we want to touch on Qatar. They've just finished the World Cup. People are lauding it. Large segments of the soccer watching world, at least, are lauding it because, no one really paid attention to who the Qataris are as a country, not the people. The people, they're great. They're ordinary people like anybody else. But like most societies that are governed by really awkward and sometimes downright murderous people in government, there's very little scrutiny of the Qatari government and some of the things, the shenanigans it gets up to. Who are the Qataris? And, their association with some terrorist organizations and affinity, in fact, in some cases to them. Who are these people, and why was there such little scrutiny around this?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, no, it's not interesting. I have some theories on that. I mean, the regime is an intensely orthodox, conservative Islamist grouping. It's not. And it's wealthy. It's very small. The population is under 300,000 of people who actually registered as Qataris, and they don't. They have a very much the sort of more subtly expressed, perhaps, attitude towards, for example, towards Israel and towards the Jews that the Iranians have. They're in the same sort of camp. But they're sophisticated and they're very, very wealthy. I mean, they have the gas that Europe needs to move to get away from Russia. They have oil. I mean, they're in the pound seat. Now, what was very much in focus was being the autocratic regime that they are, and that, you know, the suppression of women's rights, of gay rights, etc. Those causes were on display. They stopped people from expressing them. They stopped flags. They stopped people wearing rainbow caps, etc., etc. What wasn't on display, but which was felt in sort of private quarters, well, there was actually one instance of display, is their attitude towards Israel. The first thing was that at one point in one game, a huge banner was displayed in the crowd, Free Palestine. Did nothing about that. And apparently, I've read a number of reports from Israeli journalists who said they got on really, really well with the other journalists, the Qatari journalists they interviewed and other Qataris, until they were asked where they were from. And then they literally sat down. So the attitude to Israel is, shall we say, a traditional Islamist attitude. And that is that a Jewish state should not exist in the Middle East, Jewish state. And it's not Israel or anti-Zionist. It just must not exist. And to that end, it is the biggest supporter, financial supporter of terrorist groups, or Islamist groups anywhere in the world, and include Hamas, they include Hezbollah, they include a variety of others, and they include organizations in the West who are allied to organizations like Hamas. So
that's right.
The thing is, their agenda is quieter than Iran's, but their intention towards the Jewish state is no different. And that didn't raise any real issue. And that's partly, I think, because, you know, my feeling is, for example, with the rise of anti-Semitism in the world, the one thing that sort of just keeps not happening is there's no real pressure put on the Palestinians or their supporters to make concessions, to come to the table, to say that they will not be supported if they keep just sitting there. They keep treating them only as victims, and nothing changes. It doesn't matter how many definitions of anti-Semitism the West supports in countries or in cities. And I think that wasn't spoken, and that certainly is not going to change. I actually think very little is going to change after the World Cup. They did their show. They put on a good World Cup. It ran well. The most ideal team won. I mean, I have to say it was exciting to watch Argentina win. But Qatar may benefit a bit financially from it, but I don't think it's going to make a huge deal of difference. It's still too damn hot in summer and rather depressing vistas at all times of the year.
Well, as a final thought, because we've totally run out of time, but I mean, Sara, I think the points you raised are incredibly important insofar as there is a politics here and a morality here which was really concealed from the rest of the world, but we saw flash in the pan moments of it. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds here of, you know, how they treated people who were wearing rainbow flags and the like. At the end of the day, I must, I suppose, accept that they are a society that, you know, because of their religious, conservative, Islamic ways, they'll hold those views. Okay, great, fine. But my thing is, why then host a global spectacle like this, where you know people from around the world who hold views that you don't necessarily agree with will come to your backyard? And if anything, why do so when you also object to those people, or not those people, sorry, but rather people, period? Also asking, scrutinizing questions of the way in which your society is governed, and also your views that you hold around certain people, whether it be gays, lesbians, or Jews in particular. And that's why when you raise this issue, as one to talk about it, it registered at a very personal level, because as someone who is Jewish, it makes me wonder, you know, on the one hand, Israel has done a lot of work to warm relations with the Arab world, you know, especially the Abraham Accords, and various Arab countries are saying, why were we even having this fight? You know, let's strike a deal and let's work together, especially against those who actually threaten both of our existence, Iran and other nations. You know, the Saudis are a more recent case who are beginning to warm relations with the Israelis. Final thoughts on that? Surely this should be the direction the world is heading in, you know, especially between the Arab and Israeli relations.
Well, you see, I think that, I mean, certainly the Sunni Arab world is moving towards Israel. And in an interview I saw of Benjamin Netanyahu talking about his autobiography, he basically said that there's no way that the Abraham Accords would have come about if they didn't have the tacit approval of the Saudis. So the Saudis are things are moving, but Qatar is a Shia state, so it's like Iran. I think the reason for going for the World Cup, and sadly, I think the reason they probably got it was money, because in every respect, Qatar is not a venue. If an event like that is an image cleaner, and I think that's the reason.
Hate to say it, but you're right, and we're gonna have to maybe end it there. Sara, awesome having you on the show, and definitely we'll have more of you on the show. That is, of course, Sara Gon from the Institute of Race Relations. Make sure, please, you find them on their content, their work, at dailyfriend.co.za. With that being said, thank you, dear viewer, for watching this, another episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Remember, I'm coming to you daily, every evening at 7 p.m. Pardon me. So 2 offerings from me per day for this week only. Vuganazos in the morning from 7 a.m. and of course in the evenings at 7 p.m. You'll see this beautiful Zulu mic on your screens. Hope you guys are enjoying the week. And with that being said, have a great evening. See you tomorrow morning for Ivuganazo, and tomorrow evening again for the BDL show. With that being said, a reminder to you, never trust a commie.